February 2nd, 1943. Dawn. The western bank of the Volga River, Stalingrad. The wind cuts first. It slices through torn greatcoats and finds the skin beneath, carrying with it the smell of burned oil, brick dust, and something darker, sweet and metallic. Snow drifts into shell craters that were still smoking hours ago. Somewhere, a wall collapses with a sound like a tired sigh. Red Army soldiers step forward cautiously, rifles raised, boots crunching over frozen rubble. No shots answer them. For the first time in months, Stalingrad does not shoot back. Captain Ivan Pavlov, his face hollowed by weeks without sleep, pauses at the edge of what used to be a street. He knows this corner, or at least he thinks he does. There was once a tram line here, a bakery, a school. Now there is only a canyon of shattered brick and twisted steel, the buildings chewed down to their bones. A sergeant mutters, almost to himself, "Is this it?" No one answers. They had imagined this moment 1,000 times during the fighting. Victory, relief, shouts, maybe even a celebration. Instead, there is only silence, thick, oppressive, unnatural. The guns that had thundered day and night since August are gone, leaving behind a ringing emptiness that presses against the skull. You can almost hear the men breathing, fog blooming from their mouths as they advance, step by step, into the ruins. A Red Army runner slips on ice-coated soot and blood, catches himself on a jagged doorway. Inside the doorway, frozen stiff, a German soldier lies half-buried beneath a beam. His eyes are open. Frost rims his lashes. He looks as if he died mid-thought. No one stops.
These men have seen too much to stop now. Only hours earlier, the last organized German resistance had ended. Field Marshal Friedrich Paulus, promoted by Hitler in a final, bitter gesture, had surrendered the southern pocket. In the north, isolated units laid down their weapons soon after. The Sixth Army, once the pride of the Wehrmacht, was finished. But the soldiers walking into Stalingrad do not feel triumph. They feel disbelief. Private Nikolai Voronov, 19 years old, from a village near Kursk, stares at a collapsed apartment block. A child's wooden sled sticks out from the debris, one runner snapped clean off. He thinks of his younger sister. He thinks of home. Then he looks away. "Comrade Lieutenant," he says quietly, "how did anyone live here?" The lieutenant doesn't answer. He doesn't know how to explain that people didn't live here. They endured.
They fought. They died. The men moved deeper into the city, past landmarks that exist now only in memory and maps. The Red October factory looms ahead, its skeletal frames blackened by fire. Months ago, battles were fought here, room by room, staircase by staircase, sometimes with opposing soldiers separated by a single wall. Now, the factory is a grave. Frozen bodies lie where they fell, German and Soviet alike tangled together in death. Rifles still clutched in stiff fingers, helmets crushed flat by falling masonry. One soldier's hand protrudes from the snow, two fingers raised, as if signaling to someone who will never come. A corporal crosses himself quickly before stepping over the remains. War correspondent Vasily Grossman, notebook clenched in numb fingers, follows behind the troops. He has seen destruction before, Kiev, Smolensk, but nothing prepares him for this. Stalingrad is not a ruined city, it is an erased one. He later writes that the city looked as though a giant had walked through it, grinding stone and flesh together underfoot. Grossman stops near the Volga embankment. The great river flows on, indifferent, slabs of ice knocking gently against each other. During the battle, thousands of soldiers crossed this water under fire, some never making it to the opposite bank. Now the crossings are quiet, too quiet. A group of soldiers finds a cellar entrance partially buried under debris. They shout, no answer. They clear away bricks with gloved hands until the door gives. Inside, they find civilians.
A woman blinks up at the light, her face gray with dust and hunger. A child clings to her skirt, eyes wide, silent. An old man sits against the wall, unmoving, wrapped in layers of rags. "We are Red Army," the sergeant says gently. "It's over." The woman doesn't cry, she doesn't smile, she just nods once, as if acknowledging a fact she no longer has the strength to feel. Later, soldiers will say this was the moment that broke them, not the fighting, not the fear, but seeing what was left. As they advance, the men begin to talk in low voices, not about tactics, not about medals. They talk about whether Stalingrad can ever be rebuilt. One soldier kicks at a brick, sending it skittering across the ice. "There's nothing left," he says. "How do you rebuild Gons?" Another answers, "We rebuilt Moscow. We'll rebuild this." But even as he says it, his voice lacks conviction. Near Mamayev Kurgan, the hill that changed hands dozens of times, the ground is pockmarked beyond recognition. Metal fragments protrude from the earth like thorns. The snow is thin here, melted and refrozen by constant explosions. Every step crunches, not just on ice, but on debris ground so fine it resembles ash.
A junior lieutenant bends down and picks something up. A helmet badge. German. The eagle is bent, one wing torn away. He pockets it without thinking, then stops, suddenly unsure why he did. There is no sense of trophy-taking here, only the need to prove that what they endured was real. Because standing here, in this dead city, it feels unreal. The soldiers had fought for meters, for stairwells, for walls so shattered they barely stood. They had named positions after factories, after commissars, after fallen comrades. The nail, the barricade, Ludnikov's island. Now those names hang in the air with nothing to attach to. General Vasily Chuikov, commander of the 62nd Army, arrives later to inspect positions. His coat is worn thin, his face lined and raw. He surveys the devastation without expression. This is what victory looks like, he thinks. Officers report in, casualty numbers, ammunition expended, prisoners taken. At one point, Chuikov gestures toward the city and says quietly, "Remember this," not as a boast, as a warning. Word spreads through the ranks that the battle is officially over. Some men sit down on rubble and light cigarettes with shaking hands. Others simply stand, staring. A few laugh suddenly, sharply, then fall silent again. A young soldier begins to cry, soundless, shoulders trembling. His friend puts an arm around him but says nothing. There are no words left that fit this place. They had won. They had stopped the Germans. They had turned the war. And yet, walking through Stalingrad, it does not feel like victory. It feels like standing inside a wound. As night approaches, fires flicker in the distance, where soldiers burn debris for warmth. Shadows stretch long across the ruins, making the broken city look almost alive again, as if it might rise and resume the battle. In the fading light, Private Voronov looks back toward the Volga. He thinks of the thousands who crossed it and never returned. He thinks of the voices that once filled these streets. Then a realization settles in, heavy, unavoidable. The fighting may be over here, but whatever Stalingrad has done to them will never leave. And only later, Much later will the soldiers begin to speak aloud what they truly felt when they first stepped into this silence. The firing has stopped, but the silence is worse. It presses in on the men as they move forward, boots crunching over brick dust and frozen ash. Somewhere behind them, an artillery piece fires a single round, more habit than necessity. The echo rolls across the Volga bank and dies without reply. Captain Ivan Voronov, 62nd Army, pauses in what used to be a street. The map in his gloved hands is useless now. There are no streets left, only corridors carved by shell fire. Buildings have been reduced to facades, like stage props left standing after a fire. Windows stare back like empty eye sockets.
You could almost feel the cold crawling through the gaps in the ruins. -20 degrees, January 1943. The wind off the Volga carries the smell first. Burned oil, cordite, rot. Sweet and metallic. The smell of a city that has died violently. A Red Army private mutters, barely audible, "Здесь был город." There was a city here. No one answers him. They step around bodies without comment. German field gray mixed with Soviet brown, some frozen in crouches, rifle still clutched, others half buried under collapsed masonry, only a boot or a hand visible, pointing nowhere. Death here is not dramatic anymore. It is administrative, everywhere, endless. Voronov notes it later in his journal. Victory did not shout, it whispered, and it smelled like decay. The men expected cheering, they expected banners, they expected something, anything that felt like triumph. Instead, Stalingrad greets them like a grave that has been left open too long. A lieutenant from the 13th Guards Rifle Division stops near the skeletal remains of a factory wall. The red-painted letters are still barely visible through soot and frost. Krasny Oktyabr, Red October. He runs his hand along the brick. The wall shivers, then collapses with a dry, exhausted sigh. Dust fills the air. The lieutenant laughs once, short, sharp, and then goes quiet. This was what they fought for. Months of room-to-room killing, stairwells choked with corpses, basements where men stabbed each other in the dark because firing a rifle would draw artillery, a city where survival meant learning which wall would collapse last, not which would protect you. Now it's over, or so it seems. From a cratered intersection, a voice suddenly shouts, German, hoarse, desperate, "Nicht schießen! Don't shoot!" Red Army rifles snap up instantly, fingers tense. A dozen men freeze, hearts hammering. From behind a pile of rubble, a Wehrmacht soldier stumbles into view. He is skeletal, beard matted with ice. His greatcoat hangs on him as if it belonged to a corpse. He drops his rifle before anyone orders him to. Then another, and another. A trickle becomes a stream. German soldiers emerge from cellars, tunnels, shell holes, places men were never meant to live. Some cry openly, others stare straight ahead, eyes glassy, mouths moving silently, as if still counting artillery impacts that will never come. Private Sergei Mikhailov watches them pass. They looked like ghosts, he later says, and I realized we must look the same. A Soviet sergeant kicks open a cellar door. Inside, 3 bodies, German, 1 Soviet, all frozen together, backs against the wall, as if they had agreed to die in company. The sergeant closes the door again, gently. There is no hatred left in him, only exhaustion.
And confusion. Because how do you feel victorious in a place where nothing has survived, including the reason you came? Near the Volga embankment, political officer Alexei Chuyanov surveys the wreckage through field glasses. He has seen cities destroyed before: Kiev, Smolensk, Rostov. This is different. Stalingrad is not destroyed outward, it is destroyed inward.
Every block has been fought over so many times it no longer belongs to any side. Walls are shaved flat by machine gun fire. Staircases lead nowhere. Pipes stick out of the ground like broken bones. A Red Army flag is raised over a shattered administrative building. It flaps weakly in the wind, catching on exposed rebar. No one salutes.
They just watch it, silently. Chuyanov writes a report to Moscow that night. The city exists only in name. What remains cannot be rebuilt, only replaced. Downriver, medics move through the ruins with stretchers, but there is little to do. Most survivors who needed help are already dead. Others refuse aid, insisting on standing, on walking, on being upright now that the battle is over. One soldier sits on a brick and begins to laugh. Not hysterical, just a slow, wheezing chuckle that won't stop. Their comrades leave him there. They know better than to interfere. Another man, barely 19, kneels beside a collapsed wall and begins digging with his bare hands. His fingers bleed almost immediately. "What are you doing?" someone asks. "My brother was here," he answers. "Somewhere." No one tells him to stop. That night, fires burn unchecked across the ruins. Not explosions, just small, stubborn flames licking at debris, fed by oil and splintered wood. They give the city a faint, hellish glow. Red Army units bivouac where they can, in basements, in shell holes, in the open. There are no intact buildings left to claim. Rations are passed out. Vodka, too. A toast is attempted. To victory, someone says. The word hangs in the air, awkward and heavy. A veteran from the tractor factory finally speaks. To silence, he corrects. They drink to that instead. As the alcohol warms their throats, men begin to talk. Not loudly, not proudly, but carefully, like they're afraid the city might hear them and wake up again. They speak of moments burned into memory. The German sniper who killed 3 men from a church tower before being crushed by artillery. The Soviet machine gunner who fired until his barrel glowed white, then kept firing anyway. The day the Volga froze just enough to cross, and just thin enough to kill. They speak of names. So many names. And then they stop speaking altogether, because the realization is settling in now. Slow and unavoidable.
This victory did not end the war. It changed it. For the first time, the German army has been annihilated, encircled, starved, erased. Field Marshal Friedrich Paulus surrendered. An entire 6th Army is gone. The men of the Red Army understand what that means, even if Moscow hasn't said it yet. The enemy can bleed. The enemy can break. And if that is true, then everything that comes next will be even worse. Captain Voronov stands alone at dawn, watching the light creep across the ruins. Frost glitters on twisted steel. The Volga flows, indifferent, eternal. He exhales slowly. Behind him lies survival. Ahead of him lies a road soaked in blood that now leads west. And as the sun rises over Stalingrad's corpse, one thought echoes through the minds of the men who lived through it. If this was the turning point, what price will the final victory demand? February 2nd, 1943. Dawn. The western bank of the Volga River. The cold is the first thing you notice. It bites through wool coats and padded jackets, through leather boots stiff with ice. The wind comes off the Volga in sharp, invisible blades, carrying the smell of smoke that never quite left the city. Somewhere in the ruins ahead, a brick collapses with a hollow crack, echoing like a rifle shot. A Red Army lieutenant named Vasily Grozman, war correspondent attached to the 62nd Army, steps forward and stops without realizing it. He's not under fire. For the first time in months, no one is shooting. In front of him lies Stalingrad. Not a city. A grave. The sun creeps up behind the smoke, casting long shadows over skeletal walls and collapsed factories. Chimneys stand alone like tombstones. Streets no longer look like streets, just corridors of crushed stone, twisted rebar, frozen corpses half buried under snow and dust.
Grossman writes later that the silence felt unnatural. After 5 months of constant shelling, screaming, and gunfire, the absence of sound presses down harder than the noise ever did. Behind him, infantrymen of the 13th Guards Rifle Division move cautiously, boots crunching over glass and brick. They don't cheer. No one raises a fist or shouts victory. They just stare. A sergeant, Nikolai Krylov, 24 years old, face blackened with soot that never washed off, kneels beside what used to be a tram line. Frozen bodies lie tangled where they fell, German field gray mixed with Soviet brown. Some still clutch weapons. Others look like they simply sat down and never stood again. Krylov mutters to no one in particular. So this is what we were fighting for. You can almost hear his breath fog the air.
This is the moment Soviet soldiers had imagined for months, dreamed about in frozen trenches, whispered about in cellars under bombardment. The day Stalingrad would be theirs again. But standing here, victory doesn't feel triumphant. It feels heavy. The fighting officially ended hours earlier. Field Marshal Friedrich Paulus, commander of the German 6th Army, had surrendered what remained of his forces. Tens of thousands of starving, frost-bitten German soldiers had stumbled out of basements and ruins, hands raised, eyes hollow. Now the Red Army walks forward, step by careful step, into what the Germans once called a fortress city. Private Ivan Chistyakov remembers the first building he entered. There was no door, just a jagged hole blasted into the wall. Inside, the floor had collapsed into the basement. He climbed down and found a German medical station, or what had been one, bandages frozen stiff, bottles shattered, a single boot lying upright, as if its owner had vanished mid-step. Pinned to the wall was a scrap of paper and pencil. Chistyakov couldn't read German, but he didn't need to. The handwriting trembled. Even the enemy suffered here, he later said. But that did not bring joy, only exhaustion. Exhaustion was everywhere. Men leaned on rifles like canes. Some sat down on rubble and didn't move for minutes, just breathing. Faces were hollow, eyes rimmed red from smoke and sleeplessness. These soldiers had survived on thin soup, frozen bread, and the constant knowledge that death could come from any wall, any cellar, any pile of bricks. They had fought room by room, staircase by staircase, sometimes hand to hand, and now walking into the aftermath, they struggled to comprehend that it was over. A captain from the 284th Rifle Division, Alexander Rodintsev, pauses near the ruins of the Red October factory. He recognizes nothing. The factory where his men once defended a single workshop for weeks is now a flattened maze of steel beams and snow-covered craters. Rodintsev closes his eyes. He sees faces that aren't here anymore. The teenage volunteer who lied about his age, the machine gunner who held a corridor alone until his ammunition ran out, the medic shot while dragging a wounded man across open ground. Victory came too late for them. Nearby, soldiers begin marking the ground with crude wooden stakes, graves, not proper ones, just places where bodies are pulled together and covered before the ground freezes solid again. One soldier whispers, "We will come back in spring and bury them properly." No one answers. As units push deeper into the city, disbelief spreads. Lieutenant Yelena Kononenko, one of the few female signal officers present, describes the moment she realized the scale of destruction. She climbed what used to be an apartment building, now reduced to 3 partial floors. From the top, she could see across kilometers of ruins. There was no horizon, she later said, only broken walls. It felt as if the earth itself had been shelled. Stalingrad had once been home to over 400,000 people.
Now it held ghosts. Children's toys lay crushed under tank tracks. A piano sat exposed to the sky, keys yellowed and cracked. On one wall, someone had scrawled in charcoal, "We were alive here." Soviet soldiers read these messages silently. Some crossed themselves. Others turned away quickly, afraid of what they might feel if they looked too long. Yet beneath the shock, something else begins to stir. Pride.
Not the loud kind, not parades and banners, a quieter, harder pride, earned inch by inch. A political officer gathers a small group near the riverbank. He reads out the order from Stavka, praising the defenders of Stalingrad. The words hang in the air, carried away by the wind. No one cheers, but backs straighten. These men know what this victory means, even if they can't yet say it aloud. For the first time since the war began, a German field army has been completely destroyed. Not pushed back, not delayed, destroyed. The soldiers don't talk about Moscow or Hitler or the course of the war. They think of one thing: we stopped them. As dusk approaches, fires flicker across the ruins, cooking fires, warmth, life returning in small, fragile sparks. Soldiers share bread, trade cigarettes, stand at shoulder to shoulder against the cold. Someone laughs, just once, at a joke too quiet to hear. Then the laughter stops, because in the distance, beyond the shattered city, the front still exists. The war is not over, not even close. And as Soviet soldiers settle into the ruins they fought so desperately to hold, a realization begins to form. Slowly, uneasily. Stalingrad is not just a victory. It is a warning of what lies ahead. And tomorrow, they will begin to understand exactly what this place has made them. February 3rd, 1943. Dawn crawls over the Volga like a wounded animal. The smoke hasn't cleared. It never really does. It just thins enough for the light to reveal what the night has been hiding. Collapsed factories, skeletal apartment blocks, chimneys standing alone like gravestones. The wind pushes ash across the snow. And the snow is no longer white. It hasn't been for months. Senior Sergeant Vasily Zaitsev steps over a frozen body without looking down. He learned not 2 weeks ago. Maybe months. Time in Stalingrad doesn't move forward. It piles up. Around him, Red Army soldiers spread through the ruins in cautious silence. Rifles held at chest height. Fingers stiff inside wool gloves. Every doorway still feels like a thread. Every basement might still breathe. But something is different. There is no answering fire. No crack of a Mauser. No sudden scream. No German voices echoing from the cellars.
Only the wind, only the sound of boots crunching over debris and bone. A young private, Ivan Kolesnikov, 19, from Ryazan, stops in the middle of what used to be a street. He turns in a slow circle, eyes wide, mouth slightly open. "That's it?" he mutters. "That's Stalingrad?" No one answers him, because no one knows how to answer that. The city does not look conquered. It looks dead. Walls are shredded by artillery. Brick dust coats everything: faces, uniforms, even eyelashes. The famous tractor factory is a gutted shell, its machines twisted and half-buried, as if the earth itself tried to swallow them. In the distance, a piano sits in the open, its keys exposed to the frost, some of them shattered by shrapnel. Lieutenant Alexander Chukov, no relation to the general, writes later that the silence was heavier than bombardment. "You can almost feel the city watching you," he says, "asking what you have done to it." The men fan out, clearing buildings by habit more than necessity. Kick the door, grenade down the stairwell, count to 3, move in. But the stairwells are empty.
Basements are filled with bodies. German soldiers slumped against walls, frozen mid-collapse. Some still clutch photographs. Some still hold rifles. Their faces are gray, eyes open, staring at nothing. A Red Army corporal bends down, gently closes one of those eyes with his thumb. No one tells him to stop. Near the Red October factory, a group of Soviet soldiers finds something unexpected. Civilians. A woman, 2 children, an old man wrapped in rags. They emerge from a hole in the ground, blinking like creatures from another world. The woman holds a tin cup. It shakes violently in her hand. "We didn't know who won," she whispers. "We only knew the shooting stopped." The soldiers don't cheer. They don't wave flags. They just stand there. One of them, Sergeant Nikolai Petrov, a veteran of Moscow, takes off his helmet and holds it against his chest. His hair is matted, his face hollow. "We're here," he says finally. "It's over." The woman begins to cry, quietly at first, then violently. The children don't understand.
They cling to her coat, eyes darting from face to face, searching for danger that doesn't come. Later, Petrov will write in a letter home, "I thought victory would feel loud. Instead, it felt like a funeral." In the northern districts, soldiers stumble across signs scrawled on walls in charcoal and blood. "We are here. Ivan was killed here. Forgive us." These aren't German messages. They are Russian.
Men stop, read them, touch the wall with gloved fingers, as if that might somehow touch the person who wrote it. Private Mikhail Sidorov finds one name carved deep into brick, his cousin's. He doesn't say a word. He just sits down on a broken stair and stares at it for a long time. Around him, the city creaks. Somewhere, a wall collapses with a dull roar, sending up a cloud of dust that glows pink in the morning light. No one flinches. At the edge of the city, near the last German pockets, the smell changes. Less smoke, more rot. Frozen corpses lie stacked where surrender columns once formed. Some German soldiers are still alive, wrapped in blankets, being herded eastward by NKVD guards. Their faces are gaunt, eyes sunken. They don't look like conquerors anymore. They don't even look like enemies. They look like survivors of something that should not have been survived. A Soviet captain watches them pass. "For months," he says quietly, "they told us the Germans were invincible." He shakes his head. They were wrong.
But there is no triumph in his voice, only exhaustion. Inside a half-collapsed apartment building, a Red Army squad pauses to rest. They light a small fire with broken furniture. Someone passes around a piece of black bread, chipped at the edges. Conversation comes slowly. "We held them," someone says. "Yes," another replies. "But look at this." They gesture at the walls, the floors. The ceiling hangs by twisted rebar. A third man speaks, barely above a whisper. "Was it worth it?" The fire crackles. No one answers. Because in Stalingrad, that question has no safe answer. That night, for the first time in months, the city is dark. No flares, no artillery. Just stars above the Volga, cold and indifferent. Soviet soldiers bed down in the ruins they fought over, listening to the unfamiliar sound of peace. Some sleep immediately, bodies giving out at last. Others lie awake, staring into the blackness, replaying every room, every scream, every friend lost. One soldier, Yuri Andreev, whispers to himself in the dark, "We lived."